it's no real secret. Everybody knows you have to put down a pre-emergent, but the question I get asked most often about pre-emergents is, what is the most effective pre-emergent? So when it comes to pre-emergents that are out on the market, the two most popular are going to be Prodiamine and Dithiopyr, also known as Dimension. Other trade names for Prodiamine are going to be Barricade, Stonewall. Those are probably the two most popular. And when determining which one to go with, really, there's a couple of different things to look at. So when you're trying to decide what to go out with, it's important to ask yourself a couple of questions. How long do you need control? When do you plan on seeding, if you live in an area where you have to reseed? And what time of year are you going out with? Also, maybe history of weeds in the yard. So let's jump into this. Let's talk about Prodiamine versus Dimension. All right, everyone, I appreciate you watching again. Today, the Grass Factor episode, we're going to be talking about Dithiopyr versus Prodiamine. These are two popular pre-emergent herbicides on the market. So to establish a baseline on which one would be a better pre-emergent to go out with this year, let's first talk about the different things that these pre-emergent herbicides do. So let me give you a breakdown of the pros and cons of going out with a product like Prodiamine. One of the biggest pros is the fact that it is so long-lasting. At max rates, you can get up to 9 months crab control from a product like Prodiamine. It's cheap. Now that it's gone generic, there's so many different formulations available. Prodiamine is definitely the more cost-effective pre-emergent to go out with. The other advantage is that you can and it should be applied early. And the reason being is that because it is a pre-emergent herbicide, the way that's going to work is create that vapor barrier that will inhibit the rooting from taking place as the weeds germinate. So the earlier we get that out, the better chance we have of stopping those weeds from germinating during that germination cycle. So the problem is that if we wait until, soil temperatures are 50 degrees, well, in a home lawn, you may have certain hot spots where the temperature may be upwards of 55, 57 degrees, and you've already had crab germinate in that area where the rest of the lawn may be okay. And so on those days where you had those temperature spikes, those hot spots can already germinate. So you go out then and you're too late. So it's best to go out with a product like Prodiamine early. And again, excellent crab control. Prodiamine is the highest rated pre-emergent of the DNAs in terms of crabgrass control. Now, on the cons, Prodiamine is a known serious root pruner. And what I say by root pruning is the way it actually works. As the cell division begins to take place in weeds and it attempts to tack down into the soil, it will prune, it'll nub that root, it'll curl it and give it like a club-like appearance and keep it from penetrating into the soil surface. The problem is that this is going to be a non-selective root pruner, meaning it's going to happen to whatever attempts to push in. So in terms of turf grasses, things like Bermuda grass can be a little tolerant of it because of the strength of the root system. Same with zoysia grass. Other warm season grasses like centipede and St. Augustine may struggle with the amount of root pruning that takes place from a product like Prodiamine. At higher rates, you have more severity in root pruning. With fescues, if the turf is already established, you already have an established root system, you don't have the root pruning taking place as severely because those roots are already in the ground and established, usually deeper than that vapor barrier exists. Then one of the other cons, and I think this goes with pre-emergents in general, is on the label it says it needs to be watered within 14 days. However, I think any of us that have been in the industry long enough have seen that if you wait 14 or 13 days to water in your Prodiamine application, you tend to get less efficacy in the long term. Also, Prodiamine, not a solid broadleaf weed preventer. Things like hairy bittercress, corn speedwell, those are all going to provide issues when using Prodiamine. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now let's flip this and let's look at Dimension real quick. Okay, so when we're talking about Dithiopyr, some of the pros are going to be the broadleaf weed activity. So things like yellow wood sorrel, oxalis, which can be difficult to control. It's a good preventative there. The hairy bittercress, the corn speedwell, all those weeds that are a little more difficult to control in the springtime. If we get this out early enough, you can actually be preventative on those products. Now keep in mind, those particular weeds, those broadleaf weeds, are going to be cool season weeds, meaning they typically germinate over winter. So the timing of getting this Dithiopyr application down would be critical for the success of the control of that. That can be difficult. You may be talking about a late fall, early winter application to get the control of those broadleaf weeds that you're looking for. One of the biggest selling points of it, and this is why everybody raves about it, is the ability to catch early crabgrass as a post-emergent. In order for that, we'll jump into that. So it does have that ability to catch crab as a post-emergent. Also, because of this early crab post capability, it can be applied late, much later than Prodiamine. Now, the cons are that this is also a root pruner. It's less of a root pruner than Prodiamine, but it is still a root pruner. Also, it's going to be very expensive. In order to get this crab post-emergent activity that I was talking about, you have to run the high rates. At the high rates, you're talking about spending a fair amount of money. And also, the other issue you run into is that even at the high rates, you're only looking at a 3 to 4 month residual. Not exactly a long time or long period of control. And also the high rate only to control that crabgrass. So, in terms of actually incorporating these two in the program, let me kind of break that down on how to best use these. Okay, so in my opinion, when choosing which pre-emergent to go out with, number one, what time of the year are you starting? I have to get started as early as possible. One, to make sure I get in all my first rounds of pre-emergents on time. Being smaller in size, it takes me a while to get to each of my properties. So if I start late January, then I know I'm not going to be on my last of that first round until maybe early March. So if I'm going out early, I'm going to choose a product like Prodiamine. Also, because of the ability for Prodiamine in particular to root prune so significantly, if it's an existing customer, if it's not a new sale that you didn't pick up, that spring, it would probably behoove you to go ahead and use the Prodiamine for existing customers. If you plan on blanketing post-emergent weed controls, it would probably behoove you to use Prodiamine. And the reason being is that it doesn't catch a lot of the broadleaf weeds that Dimension potentially can. So, just a couple of talking points there. With Dimension, on the other hand, if you plan on going out late, say you start March and you don't plan on finishing your first round until April, this may be a good product for you. If you like doing a late second split application, so if you go out in March into April, and then you want to do a second application June, July time frame, Dimension would be a good product for you. If you have a history of crabgrass, Dimension may be a good product for you. It's something that you can apply late into the season when you typically have that crab issue to try and catch it post-emergently to control it. Now, one thing you cannot do, I want to make this extremely clear, you cannot go out with a half rate of Prodiamine and then a half rate of Dimension and expect to get the same level of control. Even though these are both DNAs, they do not work synergistically like that. So if you go out with a half rate of Prodiamine, you're going to get 3 months control. If you go out with a half rate of Dimension on top of that, it's not going to broaden your control to 6 months. You're still going to get just that 3 months control. So I know a lot of people, they say, well, I'm going to go out with a half rate of Prodiamine first app, and then I'll catch with Dimension on the second app. They're not going to work like that. So when choosing to do this, and you have a history of crab control, it may behoove you to just go ahead and run the full rate of Prodiamine first, and then go out with your full rate of Dimension. Yes, that's going to add to your cost, but that's also going to improve your level of control. Me personally, when I go out with pre-emergent, I run Prodiamine 99% of the time because I know what I get from it. If I get down in split app terms, if I get down, my first one in February and I get down my second one in April, I know I'm not going to have a crab issue with that lawn. Typically, the charts show that as long as you're getting those applications down before like April 15th, that's going to be in the transition zone in my area, then you're going to get 98+% control of your crabgrass. With Dimension, on the other hand, you're going to be in that 95 if you're starting in that February timeframe. It just doesn't have the longevity to keep up with it. So, if you're going to use Dimension, you may want to start Dimension on your second round and then stretch it into your third round. If you're going to go with Prodiamine and you want to do a single app, it's okay to put that out in January, February timeframe. If you're going to do it in a split app timeframe, you want to get both of these down before the germination cycle of the crabgrass begins. So whenever that is in your area, it's important to know and make sure you have both your split applications of Prodiamine down. You don't want to put the first one down in January and then put the second one down in June. Also, lastly, the last thing to keep in mind for everybody in aeration overseed areas is know when you plan on aerating and overseeding to have all your pre-emergent out of the soil. Prodiamine in particular breaks down more so by photodegradation, so that's going to be exposure to sunlight. So that may be one thing you want to have kind of mentally prepared as you begin to move into aeration overseed season. It may help to drop the height of cut for a couple of weeks leading up to it, some deep soakings with water, and drop the height of cut to expose it to the sunlight to make sure this is out of the soil profile. With Dimension, it's going to be a time issue and it's also going to be a water issue. So it may behoove you to go ahead and crank up that irrigation, do some deep, heavy soaks to try and work this out, because Dimension is going to react more to water and water and heat more so than it would the light, where Prodiamine has issues. All right, I hope this answers some questions. Now I'm back in focus. All right, I hope this answers some questions in terms of which pre-emergent is better. Truth be known, they both have pros, they both have cons. It's just finding out where to fit them into your program, and I think that comes down to more of a timing issue. If you want to play things by soil temperature, then Dimension is probably the product for you. If you want to kind of apply it, set it and forget it type program, then Prodiamine is going to be the product for you. Both, you can't really go wrong with either product. They both work well. So just keep that in mind. All right, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. Thank you for watching. If you're new here, please click the subscribe button. That's what keeps me going. That's what lets me know to keep producing these videos. All right, y'all, have a good one. Take it easy.